Welcome back, listeners, to SportSpiel as we celebrate our 3-year anniversary with another fantastic guest. Since we launched the podcast on the 20th of April 2017, we have hosted 97 shows, and according to my calculations, Alistair may correct me on this, but I believe we have had 97 professional athletes from a huge variety of sports alongside chief execs, head coaches, and some brilliant guest contributors. And today, our 98th episode, we are delighted to welcome on our 98th athlete in the form of Jenny Meadows. Not only is it a delight to welcome a multiple major medal winner onto the show and one of Britain's best middle distance runners, it's also fantastic for us to welcome on another member of our friends at Totally Runable, having previously spoken to Natalie Jackson in late 2018. Today, we will be talking to you all about the brilliant new project set up by the company. But first of all, Jenny, welcome to the show. And how are you finding life at the moment in isolation and lockdown?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Very excited, and congrats on the landmark achievement, 3 years. That's been pretty awesome. Lockdown life, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm grateful that I'm not a professional athlete at the moment because, I'm very good at giving advice out, but not so good at following it myself. So I'm involved in lots of organisations. I do some work for England Athletics, for British Athletics. I'm in charge of actually mentoring 5 amazing young athletes, a couple of European junior champions and some really great up-and-coming athletes. And I'm giving them some very nice advice about, this is an unprecedented time, and maybe this is the opportunity to concentrate on all those 1%ers that are talked about in sports, the stretching and making sure you do your core stability, make sure you do your rehab, maybe look at some past, footage of competitions and put yourself in the shoes of former competitors and what would you do tactically, etc. But in all honesty, if I was an athlete at the moment, even though I know everyone's in the same situation, I would still be freaking out. I love normality. I love routine. I love structure. I lived my, over 20 years having a training plan, and that's what I needed to do those days. Whether it was raining outside, hailing, no matter what it was, I was getting those sessions done. So it's interesting, isn't it? Like I say, I'm glad I'm not in that situation where I'm trying to put a performance on the back of this lockdown period. But at the same time, for me, it's actually been a nice opportunity for me to kind of take a little bit of a pause for myself. And it's coming up to 4 years now since I retired from being a professional athlete. So I've actually got into a little bit more of a structure and routine. And actually, I'm getting a little bit more running done and, doing those strength and conditioning sessions and those core stability sessions. So personally, it's quite nice for me at the moment.
We've seen you've been hosting a few sort of workout videos as well with British Athletics and England Athletics. How have they been received and how much fun are they to put together?
Yeah, I just think it's one of those times where, everyone has to come together, don't they? We're all in this together. And I think sometimes that's a little bit of a safety net to actually think, okay, unprecedented times, there's nobody who's got different rules than each other. And when people have, kind of reached out for me and said, oh, would you mind doing some content? Absolutely. The England Athletics ones have been really fun. It's just, consisting of a weekly challenge. I seem to have an obsession with toilet rolls. The whole nation do, don't they?
Yes.
Most of my tasks.
Hockey players do.
Yeah, I've seen the videos, but most of my tasks involve, household items. So I'm quite fortunate that I've got access to some weights, dumbbells, etc. But I know a lot of people at home wouldn't have access to that. So I've been doing workouts with, like I say, toilet rolls, cordial bottles, all sorts of things. So I really love doing those challenges. And then British Athletics asked me to do something more like a workout, something what I've explained, those 1%ers, the core stability, all that sort of stuff. So it's kept me busy doing that sort of thing, and I'm really, really enjoying it.
Do you think that in a strange way this time and this situation will actually make people more active because they realize that how easy it is to actually be active in your own home?
Yeah, I do actually. So I've probably been out 5 days a week trying to actually run. So running's one of the easiest things, isn't it? Well, people don't necessarily find running easy when you start off, but you just need trainers and an open road. And obviously, because people can't travel far, running's a great thing to do, because you just go out of your front door and you run, however far you want, out and back, which is great. And I know normally when I go for a run, there's not many people out, but so many people are running, and it's pretty obvious that a lot of people are, not training for anything specifically, but just going out with a challenge to actually just be out in the fresh air, which is really, really nice. And so many people, I think they've just been dusting off the bikes from the sheds and all sorts of stuff, so many people cycling, which has been great. But then I just know from friends who, don't always lead active lifestyles. They've just been, online and following yoga classes and all sorts of things. One of my friends recently sent me a photo, actually, and she had a laptop set up, candles out, and she was doing some form of yoga. And I was like, this is actually amazing. So I think it does just show people, it doesn't take a lot of time. If you've got half an hour, 45 minutes, there's something that you can do. And I think, people make excuses. Oh, I'm too busy. I'm busy with work, etc. But I think hopefully this, it's kind of strange, isn't it? It's almost took lockdown to kind of give a nation this huge kind of physical activity spike, and everyone seems to be doing something at the moment. So maybe just these creative ideas that a lot of people have been putting out there, maybe these can hopefully be embedded a little bit more into society when we do make our way back to normality, whatever that will look like in the future.
And you spoke about creative ideas there. I believe your husband's been setting some people a few challenges as well on social media.
Yeah, so Trevor is very creative. He was my coach, and when I've had periods of injury, when I've talked to kind of sports scientists, or talked to doctors, strength and conditioning coaches, they're always baffled by some of the things that Trevor comes up with, but in a very positive way. So I had a couple of Achilles tendinopathy kind of injuries, and as soon as you say the word Achilles to a sports person, it's never the injury you want. I think with most injuries, you pull a muscle, oh, okay, I know what the rehab looks like, I know what the return to play looks like, this is going to be 6 weeks, etc. And with an Achilles, that's probably the only kind of injury where you're never in charge of it, and it's in charge of you. So over the years, Trevor's took a pair of spikes, for example, and sent it off to a company and got them to actually take the studs out and to replace it with a different material, and some fantastic support I've had. Manchester United, for example, let me go and use all the facilities, so I could run on an anti-gravity treadmill. So if anyone's watching or listening, they don't know what one of those is, it's basically a treadmill, but because you can't put all your pressure through your Achilles tendon, which is in your heel, it's kind of a device where you stand on it and it calibrates your weight, and it sucks some of your body weight into kind of a vacuum, so you can run on there at a reduced body weight. So I would be running on there with spikes on, which obviously allowed me to run a lot quicker rather than a normal trainer. So then when I did return to play, I got fit really, really quicker than most people, because I managed to keep up that high level of intensity, which normally drops quite a lot when you're injured. So yeah, from bizarre creative things like that to spending time when I've been injured in hyperbaric chambers, which actually give you more oxygen, which would go to the areas of injury that needed more oxygen. He's come up with all sorts of crazy things over the years, but they've worked. So I think this is a good opportunity for him as well at this moment. He's a coach, he's in charge of around about 25 young athletes. He's trying to be creative, know that athletes obviously need the physical training sessions, so he's doing stuff online once a week, twice a week, where they're all on bikes and they're trying to do the kind of high intensity exercise. He's trying to do all that sort of stuff, and he's doing things like that, and then hosting quizzes, because obviously young people, they need that social interaction as well, and it's really difficult for a lot of segments of society, but young people, they're used to being around people of their own age. So I think it is just trying to keep normality as much as you can. And I think sometimes when you can just see other people, nobody's kind of suffering from FOMO. There's no fear of missing out. Nobody's doing anything exciting, guys. We're all in this same situation. So yeah, I think it's good to have someone like that who's creative. And the amount of people have said to me, oh, you're really lucky because you're co-isolating with Trevor. And it really is. He's like, keeps me entertained every day, so it's great.
Speaking of creativity, we've seen a lot of people coming up with ideas for fundraising and a lot of projects starting, and coincidentally the Totally Runable, the new project, has launched in the last few days, and that is why we've got you on the show to talk to you about this, because when I saw this, I was hugely excited. So first of all, I was just wondering if you could explain a bit more about what it is and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, well, yeah, I definitely share that excitement. So Totally Runable was founded by Natalie Jackson and Emily Freeman, and I think I'm going to say it was at the back end of 2014. It could have been 2015, so forgive me if I'm not quite right, girls. But yeah, brilliant company, and we really work to promote girls and women in sports. We work predominantly in schools now, so we work with kind of the staff and the pupils. A lot of the time we measure whether schools, which I can actually say 100% of schools in the UK have got a gender sport gap. So basically we get year 1 and year 2 children to do a continuous running task. So year 1s, we get them to run for 10 minutes, year 2s, 15 minutes. And we literally just measure how far they run in that time. And yes, it is about the physical exertion, but sometimes it's really down to confidence and mindset. And we see throughout every single year group that the boys outperform the girls. And it's basically linked to confidence, not necessarily, their physical ability. So we also get them to rate their confidence level. And it's very, very obvious. A lot of the girls will say, oh, I'm not sporty, or I'm not very confident. On even the most sporty girls will say, well, I'm quite sporty, where the boys have got a totally different attitude to sport, and they'll say, oh yeah, I'm really good at this, oh, I'm brilliant at this, etc. So we've done quite a lot of work in schools, and we know from the research that we've done, back end of 2018, Totally Runable did a project over 12 months. It was 9 national newspapers, and they looked at the national newspapers and they bought them on a weekly basis for a 12-month period. And actually it was quite shocking. They looked at all the images of girls playing sports, and it actually came up around about 3% of all the images of people playing sport were actually of women. So straight from that, we launched the campaign See Sporty, Be Sporty. And, the kind of theory behind that is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So you need some role models. And then specifically what we've decided to do during this period, which is really tricky, because you think to yourself, okay, is lockdown a good time to do this, or is it the worst time to do this? But from a practical point of view, we actually thought, okay, so a lot of the work that we're doing, obviously, has grounded to a halt because we're not in schools at the moment. So the 3 of us have got more capacity to put some time and energy into this at the moment. And also we think it might be a really good thing to kind of launch for when schools do go back. So what we're hoping to do is produce 2,500 sets of posters, and there's going to be 6 posters in every set. And the real difference is these posters are going to actually feature young girls aged 10 to 15 playing the sports that they love. So it's amazing to have role models. And myself and Emily, for example, 2 of the directors, were both Olympians, which is great. But it's really important that the girls actually see people their own age, or a couple of years older, who they'll look up to, their kind of peer group, playing sports, and actually realise, what, this is a really cool thing to do. Being sporty is completely normal, and it's something that I want to aspire to actually do. And if I look back when I started sport, I started at age 7, so I kind of got hooked really, really early. But I remember really quickly, and it's definitely when I was in primary school, and it went on into when I was in secondary school completely. If I ever had to go up in assembly to kind of, get a recognition or a reward, etc., I'd be absolutely mortified for having to go up to get this award. And almost feel like I wasn't normal, like, oh, you're the runner, aren't you? Where I actually downplayed how much I loved it and how good I was at it, because I didn't want to stand out from everybody else. So I think with something not quite gone right with the legacy of 2012, really, because 2012 was an amazing time and we had so many female role models that, you know, all the young girls and women could look up to in this country. And, you know, that was an unprecedented time, but I just don't think we've carried the momentum on from there now. So I'm really hoping that, you know, this campaign, C Sporty, Be Sporty, and the role models poster campaign can really just be the start of girls actually seeing something real and something that they not only aspire to, but they actually think, this is me, I can identify with this, and this is just what girls do, it's just normality. And hopefully it'll give girls that kind of confidence and that motivation to actually think, you know, I want to go, I want to try some of these sports, and it is completely normal to do that. So yeah, we're really, really excited about this, and obviously hoping that we can reach our target. So basically we've launched a Kickstarter campaign, C Sporty Be Sporty, and we're hoping to raise £6,000, and we started that at the beginning of, well, I can't even think what day it was, but basically around about a week ago now, and the campaign lasts for 4 weeks, so I think it finishes on the 10th of May. So we're working really, really hard in this short 4-week period to try and reach that £6,000 target, and it'll give us a real opportunity to, you know, I feel make a really, real big difference to, you know, girls' sport, particularly in schools.
It's interesting the posters route that you've gone down, because so many athletes that we've spoken to on the show have said that when they were growing up, like female athletes, they would have posters of like men in their room, and so many female athletes have said that's something they want to change. So I guess was that something that was in your mind as well, or was it just about getting those visual cues out there, and that the poster is the best way of doing that and being able to put them up in schools?
Yeah, so we work in a lot of schools, and you know, we do a variety of things. So one of the things that we do is we run some workshops with the girls, and these have been really, really interesting actually, because, you know, schools actually take girls out of the class and we do the workshops with the girls specifically. We just found if we did it with the boys as well, the girls weren't very open to kind of discussing things, and the boys would take over. So the boys stay in the class, the girls come out and, you know, work with two of us. And we obviously do some physical activity, because that's obviously what we want to make sure that girls are, you know, being more physically active. But the other part of the workshop is really having some real interesting conversations with them. And we work quite a lot on different topics every single week. So who I am. So, you know, girls really struggle to say what their strengths are. So it's really interesting once we have to say, oh, come on, think a little bit more, maybe ask one of your friends. You know, they're not very nice to themselves almost. And then another topic we talk about is being brave. You know, lots of situations where we get the girls to say, oh, has anybody else ever felt nervous? And then they talk in those situations and they get some real good qualitative data and, you know, experiences out. And then we talk quite a lot about fixed mindset and growth mindset, etc., and ask them for examples of that. And we always ask for a female teacher to kind of be present. And, you know, I think at the moment we're realising how amazing teachers are, especially in lockdown when a lot of parents are now homeschooling. I think, you know, no one will ever go back to school and complain about teachers, because I think this is just an opportunity where we realise how amazing teachers are. But so many times when we're having these conversations with the girls and there's a teacher present, they're kind of looking at us and going, oh gosh, I'm really sorry, you must feel, you know, think really bad of us, because we didn't know the girls felt like this. But this is just because they've never been given the opportunity to be on their own as a group of females and discuss about, you know, gender and how that influences, you know, decisions to take part in sport. So one of my best examples I can probably think of is, you know, if there's an after school club and there's a limited number, the teacher quite often would say, oh, okay, we've got a basketball coach coming in, put your hands up, who wants to do it? and there might be a few girls who want to do it, but the boys will put their hands up straight away, and a few of the girls will look around the room and see if any other girls are putting their hand up. So then there might be one or two brave enough to do it, but predominantly not. So then when you ask the teacher, oh, why did none of the girls take part in the basketball after school club, they say, well, none of them put their hand up. But, you know, it takes a lot more confidence for girls to think that that's normal and that's what I can play, etc. So I think we thought about the posters, because one of the things we do is say to the girls, okay, so we know there's a problem. You've told us there's a problem. You've told us all the reasons why. What would help you, kind of change your mind? What would make you help other people in the school, maybe some of the younger kids? What do you think would help? And they always say, oh, posters. I think it'd be really good if we had some posters around the school, etc. So I think our decision was obviously based on that. And then also from discussions, myself and Emily, like I say, both been Olympians, we never had any posters on our wall, which, I think especially for girls, it was almost like pop bands and things like that. There's never really been any posters of females. I think boys can buy, football magazines, and they can have pull-out sections, etc. And that resource just doesn't seem to be there for girls. So we actually thought, you know what, 100% what we were talking about, from the newspapers, there's very few images of females playing sport. So if we could create something specifically for sports clubs, for schools, anywhere where girls and boys, because I think boys as well need to be educated around, a lot of boys say, oh, I let the girls play football, but we're like, well, it's not your game. What do you mean let them? It is, your rules aren't up to you. You don't dictate them. So I think it's educating the boys as well. And if boys can see posters of girls as well, they from a very early age just think, well, girls and boys play sport and there is an equal opportunity. So I think eventually this will really help kind of narrow, definitely close that gender sport gap within schools. And of course schools are a great part of giving girls that first experience really of sport.
It's interesting that the approach you've taken, because a lot of the things that I'm trying to change at the moment is being able to talk about more about women's sports and like getting more coverage of like the elite teams. But it seems as though that actually for the girls at this age, it's actually almost being able to see people they can relate to and people who are the same as them. That seems to be the more powerful message.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely that relatable aspect of it. And Emily and myself go into some of the schools and do some of the sessions, and we're really kind of cautious not to tell the girls that we've been Olympic athletes. We're just Jenny and Emily, and then it might be to get to week 2 or 3 where maybe a teacher has mentioned it, or we'll bring it up in conversation. But we've already had some conversations with the girls about times when we failed and we felt like giving up, or times when we felt really nervous about something, really afraid. So I think when they see that we're completely normal and relatable, then they sort of think, oh, well, why can't I do sport? Because they're not amazing. And I think that's the really important thing. I think, being a role model isn't about always winning and always being successful. It's about a journey and developing through sport and through life, etc. And there's, so many examples of how, being involved in sport, it doesn't matter if you don't play for your county or play for your school, or it's not always performance related, but so many skills that you can kind of, and they call them the soft skills, and I absolutely don't think they should be called soft skills because they're very important skills, but communication and having confidence to stand up and read in front of class, etc., meeting deadlines, planning skills, all of these things can be really generated from sport. So I think there's just so many kind of transitional things that sport can do to the wider sporting and lifestyle context. And I just think it's really, really important that the girls who are going to feature on our poster campaign are that age, the 10 to 15. So they are going to appear in primary schools. So, you know, it's kind of girls age probably year 5 and year 6, you know, 10 and 11. But then we think it is important to have, you know, girls a couple of years older, because I think girls are always looking at those girls a little couple of years older and thinking, oh, that's what I want to be like when I'm 14, etc. So it is about being relatable. And at the moment we've got 4 girls who we're really excited about, who are very involved in their sports and very dedicated, and, you know, really excited to kind of be put as a role model, and they're going to feature in the schools, which is exciting. But at the same time, we've got space allocated for 2 more. So at the same time, we're asking people, you know, enter yourselves, you know, give us a picture of you doing sport along with 150 words. Tell us why you're a role model, why you would like to be on these posters. And I think it'll be really exciting for the 6 that are picked to actually, you know, have that exposure and actually think, oh, you know what, someone believes in me. I'm a role model and I'm going to be in all of these schools. So I think that'll be really exciting for them as well.
I was sitting here thinking, I'm thinking if I was, you know, that age and had that opportunity, I definitely want to get involved. So if anyone's listening and knows someone that wants to get involved, if you're, you know, 10 to 15 year old and you want to do that, then please sign up and try and get involved whenever you can. Have you, from your experiences of going into schools, have you found that things have improved a bit compared to when you were at school? Or do you think that actually we sort of haven't made that much progress in changing the confidence of young girls to want to take up sport?
Yeah, it's a bit tricky, really. So I would actually say that my primary school were not very sporty whatsoever. So I think I took part in sport just because it was kind of in my DNA, and my parents were quite sporty and, you know, really supportive as well. So one of our statistics that we've actually found is that girls actually start losing confidence in a sporting context from age 7, which, you know, I find really, really shocking. I think, my goodness, age 7, you know, you should still be playing and just enjoying everything from age 7. And I actually took up sport, the sport of athletics, when I was age 7. So I think I was probably one of those lucky ones who kind of just got into sport at the right age. And, you know, before I started thinking, oh, you know, this isn't what girls do. And I 100%, like I've explained, you know, definitely thought a couple of years later, oh, I don't want to go up for that award. I don't want anyone to actually think I'm different from anybody else. I really, really downplayed it. But I just think society's kind of changed. There's so many different, you know, things that people can do in the leisure time, etc. So I think sport was a bigger thing when I was growing up. You know, everyone seemed to go swimming, everyone seemed to take up some sort of physical activity. But, you know, it's hard as well for parents now, of course, isn't it? Because everyone works different patterns and shifts, etc. And, you know, a lot of young people rely on, obviously, parents or guardians to take them. So I think school is really, really important. You know, I think schools are so important in so many different ways now. They're real kind of a community hub. And I think a lot of people establish their first experience of, you know, sport and physical activity from school. I would say that, you know, when we do go into schools, there seems to be loads of after school clubs, which is amazing. And it's really nice to see, whether, you know, it's sports related or it's science or technology. You know, there's so many different opportunities for young people now, which is absolutely fantastic. But I do think it's just how people get involved, because I think a lot of the times we see it's the same kids, you know, they'll turn up for the football, they'll turn up for the basketball, whatever the after school club is, it's that kind of group. But it's just really making sure there's opportunities for every single group to do something. So, you know, Totally Runable, you know, we talk about running, and it's not just about running, because a lot of the girls sometimes will come to our sessions and say, how far are we going to run? We say, like, look, don't worry about the running bit, you know, and we'll do some kind of activities where we see a lot of the girls at the beginning, they kind of don't really want to join in, or they've had some negative experiences, or they'll be like, well, I'm not sporty, or, you know, they'll have some kind of ailment and, no, I need to sit out at the side. And then when they start seeing the session, all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe I can join in with this next task. You know, so I think the really good thing is, when we do go into a lot of schools, we're not having girls trying to come with excuses not to do it. We normally, generally, by the end of our courses, have got a full kind of list of participants, which is great. And sometimes we see the teachers and they'll say, oh, I didn't expect such a body to join in this session. They don't normally like this. So I think we're just living in an age where young people are so kind of, used to kind of labeling themselves. So they're either sporty, they're not sporty, oh, I suffer from anxiety, I don't like this, I don't like that, for example. And I think a lot of times people have put themselves in brackets, from a very, very young age. So I think a big part of this is, to actually visibly see girls of all different shapes and sizes playing a variety of different sports. It might just be that kind of first instinct where somebody thinks, oh, actually, she looks a little bit like me, or, oh, I thought you had to be super slim to do this sport, or I thought you had to look a certain way, or I didn't know that girls could play that sport. So I just think, visual images, they say a picture can speak 1,000 words, don't they? So I think it would be really, really good. I mean, I literally can't wait to see what the images are going to look like. But of course, we've got to get there, first of all. So we need to raise £6,000 for our initial print run, which will feature a set of 6 posters, and that'll go through to 2,500 schools, and that'll actually reach just less than 500,000 pupils, girls and boys, of course, because we need to, whilst it is girls playing sport, we need to bring boys along for the journey as well, because we need to really change the mindsets of boys as well. We need to really work on the kind of language. There can be some very gender related language, oh, you kick that like a girl, or all that sort of language, and exactly what I said, oh, I let the girls play. So we just really need to make sure everything's kind of general neutral. It's real equality for both genders, and we're just going to work really, really hard this next 3-week period, hopefully build up quite a lot of publicity so we can really make sure we hit that £6,000, because we feel, when schools go back, hopefully September, when all the schools are going back, we're hoping this is a real opportunity to launch that, to change those mindsets, and actually, let's be really grateful that everyone's gone back to normality, as far as going back to school, going back to work, etc. But let's change what normality is for school PE, and what girls actually think is achievable, and let's get them to aspire to be more, and to do more as well.
Something you mentioned a minute or so ago there was about the way sort of images are portrayed and the way people are shown. And I remember when we spoke to Natalie a year and a half ago or so, one of the things that stuck with me was not just the shocking lack of women in sports sections of newspapers, but actually also the way they were being portrayed, and differently to men. And it's made me much more aware of how I do it when I'm at work, the way I portray our women. And fortunately, we're a 50-50 sport, so it's very easy to portray our women in the same way as the men. But have you noticed that over the last sort of few months, few years, that women, when they are being pictured doing their event, or are you still finding that it's sort of, there's still more of a bias towards the men being the active sort of heroic ones?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the more you kind of see it, the more it frustrates you. And at first, I think it's kind of, at the back of your head, but because you've lived in that society for so long, it's almost not that you accept it, but you just see that as being the norm. And then when it's actually presented to you in a certain way, you think, oh yeah. So quite a lot of the images of females in sport is, with a trophy that they've just won, etc. And the men's images are kind of beads of sweat dripping off them, etc. And it's almost, oh, we don't want to see women do that. So we've loved some of the campaigns that's come out. This girl Can has been brilliant to show, it's not just about performance, it's about, what sport can do for you. We're not trying to find the next generation of Olympic athletes with these posters. We're trying to just give girls, that kind of confidence to be themselves. If you're sporty, amazing, embrace it, try as many things as you can. If you want to go for that performance, absolutely great. But those girls who are not physically active, you know, explain why physical activity is really important. We obviously see the financial burden on the NHS at the moment through this whole pandemic. We need to help the NHS out. We don't want any obesity, any of, you know, those things going on in the future. So really educating this young generation will hopefully really pay off in, you know, generations and decades to come. But I think more than that, it's just really highlighting to girls that, you know, they have a choice, and it's an opportunity, and we'll show them in quite a lot of our workshops, and we'll ask them to choose. So we'll give a statistic, for example, and we'll say, oh, okay, so let's think about a certain sport, and, you know, and we'll give them a percentage to guess, you know, how many female coaches do you think take part in this sport, etc. And we'll give them choices. And I think a lot of them already know there's more men. So they'll kind of, if we give them maybe 3 choices, they'll go, well, no, it's definitely not that one, because I know it's kind of male dominated, but maybe it can be this really low one, but it can't possibly be as low as this, for example. And then most of the statistics are the very low one, and they're kind of outraged. They're like, well, what are we going to do about this? This isn't fair. And I think, you know, at first, I think when we started doing some of the workshops, I thought, oh my goodness, what have we started? But the girls actually go, well, we need to change it. I don't know why we're in this situation. You know, what can we do about it? So I think it's just getting them to kind of think in that way. And, you know, whilst there has been so many improvements, you know, so, you know, I think about the England netball team, how amazing they did when they won the Commonwealth Games, and obviously the one, you know, BBC Sports Personality of the Year, which was amazing, and so many people got behind them. Obviously the hockey as well, you know, being Olympic champions, you know, there's moments where the whole nation come together. The Lionesses, you know, at the Euros did absolutely amazing, but they are moments, and, you know, that it's not sustainable, and it doesn't keep going like it does, obviously, you know, in men's sport. And, you know, I'll be in the car and I'll be listening to the radio, and it'll just say about, oh, well, the Cricket World Cup. And, you know, I'll shout out, well, which one, men's or women's? You know, it's just the World Cup, and it's, well, they're talking about the men's. So I think it is about that language that we need to use, and it needs to almost come into society a little bit more. But I think if we actually educate the young generation about this, they'll then realise there are things that they can do differently, and at the end of the day, we'll be wanting them to, you know, be the creative ones for us in the future. So yeah, some things are really changing for the better, but we are still stagnated in, you know, the normalities of kind of what already pre-exists, and what's always been there for, you know, the majority of our lives.
Do you think athletics then is a slight, almost an advantage, say, because going up through the years, like some of the female athletes that have had Tessa Sanderson, Fatima Whitbread, Liz McColgan, then to Dame Kelly Holmes, KJT, Jess Ennis Hill, Dina Asher-Smith, yourself, Christine Horugu. Do you think that actually it's slightly different in athletics, or do you still think that those barriers are there despite the so many successful British women we've had?
Yeah, you know, I think athletics is probably different than a lot of sports, like you've just said. You know, I actually have seen things change over the last 10 years. So we have had some examples, and actually your athletics knowledge is great. Well done. I don't think the majority of people on the street could not just name all of those female athletes off the top of their head. So that's pretty amazing. But I actually have seen, you know, from me being in the team as a young athlete, so I made my senior GB debut in 2002, and at the time it was predominantly males winning the medals. So that was still the time when Jonathan Edwards was around, Colin Jackson, Jason Gardner, you know, all those sorts of athletes. And I can definitely think back to when I was a junior athlete, and we would always have a Great Britain junior athlete, under 20 athlete of the year. And I remember one year Nicola Sanders winning that. Obviously, she went on to be a great senior athlete over 400 metres. But she won that award winning a European junior bronze medal over the 400 metre hurdles. Now, if we go to the European Junior Championships now, we'll have 4 or 5 winning gold, where at that time, 1999, I think it was, the best female was a bronze medalist. So, if we go forward now, KJT, Dina Asher-Smith, Laura Muir, etc., our women's 4x1 team, the women are actually outperforming the men in British athletics at the moment. Women are the medal winners. We've only really had Mo Farah for the last, decade winning those medals, and then the men's relay team. But, we can think of 3 or 4 women at every single major championships who's won a medal. So that has changed, like I say, in the last 10 years. And it's wonderful to see. I've never kind of come across any gender gap in the sport of athletics. So that's great, because, there's the same number of events for men and women, which is brilliant. And, the same opportunities, the same championships, the same level of pay at the top of the sport, which is, unprecedented in a lot of sports. But when we go to a lot of schools, we do a workshop for boys, and we call it the Boys Furnace Workshop. And we just start off with a competition. We go, okay, so work in a group, normally in 4s or 5s. And we say, you've got 3 minutes, and we give them a big piece of paper, a pen each. We say, just go, write as many sports people down as you can think of. So they're off. And it's very, very interesting. Maybe, say we've got 5 groups, and they come up with maybe 40 per group. So we might have 200 names. Out of 200 names, we would have either 0, 1, or 2 females that they write down out of that collective 200. And it will either be, the biggest one is usually Serena Williams, and then the odd time, if we're in Yorkshire, for example, somebody might say Jessica Ennis, and the odd time, I think maybe Dina Asher-Smith recently, but that's it. And then we'll actually say to the boys, do you know any female athletes of anything? And then they might come out with 1 or 2, but it literally is 1 or 2 more. But it's not just been on the front of the head. They're straight away, football is a predominant one. They'll think of anyone from any team, and they'll go, they'll go continental teams. They'll go, who plays for Barcelona? Who plays for Real Madrid? And we've got all sorts of things, but it's just not in the front of their mind. They just will not come out with hardly any females. And when we ask them, they do then feel a little bit guilty. When we ask them the question, they go, oh, but it is quite shocking that they only probably know a couple of women's sports people.
Especially given the success, even if they only know football, the Lionesses recently to have 78,000 people, I think there was, at Wembley against Germany back in October, and the boys are saying that. Is as much education work, do you feel, needed then with young boys as with young girls to change these perceptions?
Yeah, and that's why we've kind of created that specific workshop for the boys. So it's a really nice workshop what we do, because we don't want to tell them what we're doing. So we start off with that, and we only address it later. And we basically just talk about kind of a made up world where people either have blue hair or purple hair. And so basically one is boys, one is girls, but they don't know that. And then we tell them, all about sports. So if you've got a certain colour hair, you're not allowed to play this sport, example. And they'll be like, well, that's not fair. Why should you not be allowed to play that just because of the colour of your hair? And then we'll really go through all the different things. They're really fed up by the end of it. They're like, well, I'm so glad this world doesn't exist. And then, at the end, when we say, well, actually it does. And then we'll link it back to the beginning where they didn't name any, female sports people, etc., etc. And you actually feel a little bit sorry for them, because you can actually see the sheer guilt on their face. We're like, oh gosh, do we do that to the girls? And we say, well, what do you think? And then we'll have a couple of minutes to think about it. And then that's when they start saying, well, we let them play football. And then we say, oh, think about what you say in it though. A girl really might want to play something, but do you think she actually wants to walk, to the area where you're playing football if there's only her? Is there anything you can do to encourage her? So I think education is really, really important for the boys as well, because it's great to do it with the girls, of course, and then they open up and they tell you what they think they need, and then that really, you know, gives us a really good platform to, you know, talk to the teachers within that school and say, oh look, this is what we found. And you know, a lot of teachers are really embracing this, and they'll say, oh great, you know, we wouldn't have found that without you guys coming in telling us, because we don't really have the opportunity to talk to the girls about this sort of stuff. But then I think really, you know, the other half of it, the only way we're ever going to change it is, like you say, by educating the boys. And the boys are really open to it, and you know, really have really shown great maturity, you know, because a lot of the boys are kind of age 10 and 11 that we're doing this with. So we always just think, you know, even if it just promotes something at the forefront of the brain, I mean, it might only last that day, it might last a week, I'm not sure, but I think definitely, you know, to do more work with boys and education on this subject, this is definitely the way we're going to actually make it sustainable.
And in terms of the education as a whole for boys and girls, do you think that's something that should come from like a national curriculum point of view and be brought into PE lessons, or is that something a governing body should be focusing more on, or is it more of a collective approach and bringing companies like yourselves in as well?
Yeah, I think it's a collective approach really, because, you know, like I say, you know, the school timetable is unbelievable. The things that the teachers have got to fit in is really, really tough. So I think a lot of the schools have been really glad to kind of get a company like Totally Runable to come in, and you know, we've really backed it up with national research, with our own research, and a lot of the schools already know that there's a gender sport gap, or they'll know the girls are less confident. Sometimes when we actually do our benchmarking session, where we get year ones to run for 10 minutes, year twos to run for 15 minutes, and you know, like I say, it's not just a physical thing, it's related to a confidence self-assessment that they do as well. We can straight away say to the schools, oh look, this is the difference, you know, and they'll say, oh yeah. And then it might be really interesting, we'll say, oh, you know, there's a certain percentage between the boys and the girls every single year, but actually this year 3 class is a huge difference, are you aware of that? And then they'll say, oh, really funny that you say that, because in that year 3 class, for example, we've got some issues, etc. And I think when we've come in and we've not seen the issues, but we've just seen it from, you know, doing a physical activity linked to a confidence, and we've, you know, backed it up with, you know, that kind of data, and it backs up with what they're already finding in school, that actually shows that, you know, we do need to do something. We need to kind of put that interim measure into trying to address something. So I think it's good if like schools can do some themselves, but I do think it needs to be more of a collective kind of discussion, and you know, people working together to kind of strategize how we can actually do that, and how we can actually, you know, make that kind of positive change, because that's what we're trying to do. It's a positive social change. We're trying to change something that's pre-existed for centuries.
And I guess linking back to the first point, and then being in lockdown and isolation, do you think that actually this difficult period of time for the whole world with this pandemic could actually then help, because people will have the chance to sit down and take the time and come up with these strategies?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So at Totally Runnable, we've kind of, you know, our work in the schools is grounded at the moment. So we're like, okay, so what should we do? And we thought, you know, is this a good time to launch this Kickstarter and this role models? Is it the best time, or is it the worst time? You know, what do we think? And again, it's one of those where I think sometimes kind of day-to-day things get in the way, and it's something you would like to do, but you never really have the opportunity to do it. So we just thought, you know what, this is absolutely a great time. And you know, when we get to the end of this Kickstarter project, we'll make sure that we reconnect with schools. I mean, we're already keeping in touch with a lot of the schools that we work with already, and one of the things that we do offer as part of our Kickstarter, C Sporty Be Sporty, is an opportunity for teachers to actually say, oh, we'd like those posters for our schools as well. So I think it's just kind of get into the forefront of people's minds, because they have got this opportunity and they're not bogged down with the day-to-day things. People are trying to, you know, plan what life is going to look like when we kind of restart. And a lot of schools know there's a gender sport gap, and they know females are less confident in the classroom, less confident of, you know, putting their hands up for certain things, etc. So I just think this would be a really, really good opportunity to, you know, drive some of those wider curriculum, kind of wider issues forwards. And yeah, I know Natalie in particular is busy, you know, away sending lots of information to lots of the schools, and just saying, you know, we're really willing to work with you guys on your strategy. Have you thought about this, that, and the other? So yeah, we're using our time really, really wisely, like I say, being really excited about this project. And I just think it's a responsibility, you know, of NGBs, national curriculum, other bodies all working together, because, you know, if it starts at school, it's just going to be great for the rest of, you know, these young people's lives, whether these people go on to sport, whether it's a wider context of, you know, whatever they're going to do in education, job related things, you know, mental health issues in the future. I just think everything starts with school these days. So, and school sport and being active is a massive, massive part of that, because, you know, there's so much data to show that, you know, those people who are more physically active, they improves concentration, improves mental health, etc. So I think, you know, like I say, we use running as a tool, but it is just a tool. You know, it's not about running. You know, it doesn't matter if you can run or not. It's just a tool to kind of talk about, you know, those wider issues in society and in life.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck with the project and with everything you do going forwards. We'll be with you the whole way. And please, if you're thinking about signing up and you're a school listening, please do pledge. We think it's going to be a fantastic project. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jenny. And
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. It was just a nice chat, and congrats on all the amazing work that you've done over the last 3 years. I'm a huge fan, and look forward to listening to many more podcasts in the future.
thank you very much.